The African-American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African-Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Kevin Wardally, political consultant, a member of the Bill Lynch Associates. Very good political consultants, and we're going to talk about politics.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
All right, now this is a big year, 2009, January 20th, Obama is inaugurated,
Yes, sir.
Starts his stimulus package. What are the challenges that this great young man faces?
Well, first I'd like to thank you, Dr. Brown. It's an honor to be on here with you. I consider you a great friend and mentor, and I'm glad to be here. But I think there are so many challenges. I mean, I was listening to, I believe Gil Noble or somebody say a few weeks ago that whenever things fall completely apart, they turn it over to us to put things back together.
They didn't turn it over. He asked for it.
True, he asked for it.
He worked on it. He took the mantra of change.
And he won it.
53 to 47.
That's right.
But that's not a landslide. That's not a mandate. That's a direction.
Although, if you look at the past several presidential elections going back to 1984, that's pretty much a landslide because we're really a 49-49 country. Yeah. And when you look at Bush, you look at Gore, you look at both of the Clinton races, 53-47 is a pretty big mandate when you look at electoral politics. But he's got so many challenges he's facing. And the most important one is the economy. And not just our economy, but the worldwide economy. I mean, when you look at when our economy goes down, how it affects Japan, how it affects Europe, how it affects Africa, our economy affects everybody else's economy. And so he's doing exactly what he needs to do. The stimulus package is a great first step. People say they don't know if it's enough money, but this has never been done before. So it's hard to know whether it's the right amount of money, if it's the wrong amount of money, but he's doing the right thing. He's grabbing this economy by its neck and really trying to bring it down and put it in control.
Now, you're a political consultant.
Yes, sir.
His skill is both in the ideas he has and the way he communicates. And he has communicated high expectations. And now many of the people who were sort of on the left and even some of the black community is saying he's weaseling away from those expectations. What do you think about that particular strategy?
Well, I would also add one other strength of his. Another strength of his that we who are on the other side in the primaries found out, he's also does a great job of involving those who are part of his constituency. He makes them feel part of the process. Even when you look at the language which he uses, right? Be the change that you want to see, right? This is a movement for all of us, right? And he makes people feel that they're part of it, which is a fantastic thing. Because although a lot of people have used the same type of language time and time again, rarely have people gravitated to it and accepted it as a mantra to move forward.
Is it because of his historic story of coming from the African father and the Kansas mother and being truly African American? Is it because of that, or is it because of the fact that the other political people have been so much down the line with the usual traditional mantra about we're going to make America better and America will be better? What do you think about that?
I honestly think that what it is, I think you hit it right on the head. I think it's his story. Not just the Kansas mother and the African father, but the fact that so many people could see themselves in him. You know, product of a single mother.
And that could be white people as well as black people, right?
Absolutely. I mean, shoot, he had more white supporters when he won Iowa than he did anything else. I think people see themselves in his story. They see the people that they know in his story, and so they think that their story is possible. And I think that's a powerful thing.
Well, I was a Jesse Jackson delegate in 1984 and 1988. And we mobilized the African-American constituency and got more people to register to vote. Absolutely. And got many more Congress people elected from the South. But what Obama has done is to cross the racial divide and bring working class people, which Jesse tried to do and did do in some states.
Absolutely.
But to bring middle class people. And I think the economic situation, more than the war, brought them to realize that Obama had some ideas that McCain and the old establishment didn't have.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, first, I'd like to thank you and Reverend Jackson for '84 and '88, because I don't think that those campaigns get the attention that they deserve, they rightfully deserve. And I'll be very honest with you, I always give credit to what you did and what Reverend Jackson did and what Bill Lynch did and others, because without that, there is no me. There were no black political consultants before '84 and '88. There's no Ron Brown.
You got to win some too.
You got to win some. Yes,
Bill Lynch and Dave Dinkins won the mayoralty, so he becomes a rumble genius, and you become the successor to the rumble genius.
Yes, sir. You got to win some, but you got to open those doors first.
Now let's be specific. People say, "Oh, you got a black as a mayor, black as a governor, black as a senator, whatever." What difference is it going to make to me? What difference is having an African-American president, an African-American governor, an African-American mayor going to make to the average black person who has to work for a living?
Well, I want to make this point very clearly to everybody who's watching and everybody who listens. It makes a huge difference. And what difference it makes is perspective. And what difference it makes is perception. When you have an African-American mayor, African-American governor, an African-American Senate Majority Leader, you have somebody who understands the history of struggle that people like you and I and our families have represented, and the challenges that they face.
Well, will that change the way in which they approach a problem?
Yes.
One of the things that many African-American elected officials get criticized for is that they don't do as much for the African-American community as the African-American community thinks they should, like appointments. You can't have a cabinet with 90% of the people African-American, but yet many people say, well, look, it ought to be at least 50-50.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. But I would say that when you look at the history of it, when you look at Harold Washington, when you look at Maynard Jackson, when you look at David Dinkins, they made many key appointments that were African-American.
Let's back up to the general public so they can recognize. The great Harold Washington was the first black mayor of Chicago.
Yes, sir.
Maynard Jackson followed Andrew Young as the mayor of Atlanta and helped to build that great Atlanta airport complex.
That's right.
And David Dinkins, of course, was the 106th mayor of the great city of New York.
That's right.
So there have been people in those key positions, and in many ways they changed the city, but in some instances the people didn't think they changed it enough. For example, Atlanta has probably one of the highest poverty rates in the country. In New York City, the school dropout rate for minorities is far higher than for the general population. So how do you put that together?
But what I would say is that when you look at each three of those administrations, just them alone, I would say that in each of those cities during those administrations, black unemployment went down. I would say black home ownership went up, and the number of black entrepreneurs went up. So I don't disagree that the problems are bad and vast, but I would say that the statistics tell us that they do what they can and how much they can for our people to come up in ways that really matter. Because if you own your business and own your house and have a job, then 9 times out of 10 you're doing all right. So I would say perhaps I always think maybe they can do more, maybe, and maybe you can never satisfy everybody. But to say that they didn't accomplish a lot and would continue to do so if we had an African-American mayor and with our African-American governor and majority leader. I mean, the Beacon School program under David Dinkins is a national model. Giuliani dismantled it, but it's a national model. And that was directly for our kids and their families. And I know a lot of folks who are probably watching this right now remember it well and are probably doing well in college right now as a consequence. So I think there's a lot there,
See, one of the things a political consultant does is to put light on optimism. Because there's a lot of pessimism.
True.
And also part of that light is the facts. The things are never as good as somebody says they are, and they're never as bad as some other people say they are. So then the question is, what are the facts, and how do you divide those facts? One of the issues that African Americans are concerned about is power. To what extent can I control the money, or we control the money? To what extent do we control the jobs? Well, given that African Americans, even in New York City, are not the majority of the population, then you have to consider, how do you work with other groups? As a political consultant, how do you advise your African-American candidates, Latino candidates, to work with the majority group, with the Caucasian?
Well, I think the key is to find issues that we all agree upon. But to never let your morals get in the way of your money. Always stay true to your core beliefs, because in the end, we all want a safe environment for our kids. We all want good education, right? We all want jobs for people in our communities. And those are issues that, regardless of race, transcend. So you build the basis of your coalition on what you really believe in, and you align yourself with folks who believe the same, and then you talk about the issues that you have in common, and say that I want my candidates to make the case to every audience that I'm the best person for your particular need, your particular issue, and that I'm going to look out for you, and you're going to have access to me when the time comes when I'm in that position, whether that be city council, assembly, mayor, governor, or president of the United States.
What role does communication play in this? Because I think every political candidate who's ever run thinks that she is the best person, knows the issue, and communicate. How do you work with your candidates to help them with their communication?
Well, we have a good gentleman in our office named Andy Hum, who is a reporter and does a show on public access.
Former Jesse Jackson delegate.
Former Jesse Jackson delegate, absolutely. We try to sit down with our candidates and try to help them pull out their story. Because so many of them, in order to get to many of these places, and you know this very well, you've had to go through a lot. And you probably have a very compelling story. You just don't know how to tell it, and you're not so convinced it's compelling because it's your story. When you look at so many of the folks who work for, whether it's Bill Thompson or you look at Carl McCall, I mean, when he ran for governor of the state of New York, he had a very compelling story. He did not do as well of a job telling that story to folks.
Now, why is that? Because of the way the campaign was organized, because of his skills, or because of his consultants? I know you weren't his consultant.
No, I wasn't. His skill was great. His skill was great.
Carl's skill is very great. So then the question is, why did that message get across?
Well, I think he got some bad advice. I think he got some bad advice. And it was an uphill battle to begin with. You had an incumbent governor who had the chips stacked pretty high.
The chips being the money.
The chips being the money, that's right, and organizational support. But I also think he got some bad advice. Some folks told him that the story of an African American whose family started on welfare and transcended to president of a bank, president of the Board of Education, to signing the check of every person who gets a check in the state of New York was not as compelling a story as it was. When in actuality, it was a very compelling story, and something that people throughout the state can understand, because all of our families have gone through trying times, and to lift yourself up and become all those things that Carl was, from reverend to senator to bank president to Board of Education president, is an incredible story that we want all of our kids to follow.
I like your words, compelling story. You've used that several times. And one of the things when you sell a product, whether it's an automobile or a television set or a telephone, you got to have a reason why people are going to vote for you.
True.
Or buy your product. However, in politics, it's so much more important. Now, if you were advising, let's say you were advising me to run for a candidate,
yes, sir.
Run for an office, what would be your strategy? How would you go about it?
Well, the first thing I would do is I'd want to sit down with you and kind of go through a checklist to talk about what have you done that you can point to. What do you believe in, right?
Belief is a real key question, because many people who run for office have a belief, but they don't want to push it too strongly because they think it might turn off some people. For example, if I have a belief that public education ought to be the main thing we ought to be doing to improve the quality of life for African Americans, I do believe that. On the other hand, some people say, well, that'll turn off the people who want to go to private schools. How would you confront a dilemma like that?
I think that's why we talk a lot to our candidates about what they believe and what their personal story is. Because if they honestly believe that, then there's a way to make that argument to the population abroad. It really is. But if they believe in it, they'll be able to, with a few tweaks, they'll be able to talk about it in every audience and try to make them understand where their perspective is. And also, when it comes to politics, we don't always have to agree. As long as we understand each other's point, can agree to disagree from time to time, and agree to meet somewhere in the middle for the betterment of the kids that we're trying to serve, sometimes we can make it work. Compromise is the art of politics.
Well, that's one of the things Obama's been criticized for now, that he did too much tax relief and not enough infrastructure and not enough money. If you were advising him, and he's got some great advisors, if you were advising him, what would you advise him to do under those circumstances?
I think he's doing exactly the right thing. And also, I would suggest that folks on the left and friends and foes alike would take a look at his record. He's never been that far left or that far right. He's always been pretty much a compromiser. He's always been someone who's a conciliator, brings people together, and comes through some kind of agreed upon decision. So this isn't exactly far off of who exactly he is.
In other words, people projected that he was that way because he's such a great, compelling speaker. But when you look at the record, he has a record of trying to compromise. And bring things together.
And trying to accomplish things. And let's be clear, in politics, if you go too far one way or too far the other way, you're not going to get that much accomplished.
For example, in New York State, people are saying we ought to tax the rich. If you were, you are a consultant, if you were advising somebody who's running for office, say, let's tax the rich, how would you handle that?
Well, tax the rich is a very interesting thing because it's the definition of rich that comes into play here.
But $250,000 is not rich, right?
No, not at all. Maybe it was, 20 years ago, but it's not rich today. Well, I would say that that's a cheap punchline. The tax the rich is a cheap punchline, and that won't solve all the problems. What I would say to a candidate, and have to several of our candidates, is that let's talk about a whole package of relief that benefits lots of different people, of which maybe a tax on the rich can be a part, but maybe targeted tax cuts are, maybe income tax relief is, maybe health care for all children is. There's a package that we can present that will better the lives of the people who live in this city and state, and that's the way, and maybe that's part of it. But just saying tax the rich is a cheap shot.
Yeah. Well, I know in the Obama-Clinton primary, Clinton said some of the same things that Obama said, but Obama got more reaction and more response. Why was that?
Well, I think in many ways, running for president is a lot about not only what you have to say, but grabbing that particular moment in time and defining that moment and your place in that moment that you're ready to lead.
What moment was that in Obama's campaign?
It's hard to put your finger on.
I've got my idea. Oh, hear yours.
Most folks point to Iowa.
That's what I would do.
Most folks point to Iowa because that was the moment where he transcended in a lot of people's eyes.
That's right.
Where a lot of people who never gave him a chance of winning but liked him, then saw that the math was possible, including our own people.
Yeah.
Our own people. When you look at the polling prior to Iowa and after Iowa, you'll see a 300% point change because our people said that if he can win Iowa, but there's only 70,000 black people in the whole state, then he can do this. It's possible now.
Now, but after that, he lost
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, and then Clinton won some border states.
Yeah.
What got him over the top?
What got him over the top was he played the caucus game better than the Clinton campaign did.
Is the caucus game, that's where a group of people get together and decide, is that really democratic? I'm really putting you on the spot.
See, I don't want to be a sore loser here.
No, you're not a sore loser. Give the pros and cons.
I am not a proponent of the caucus system because what it does is it allows special interests and it allows small groups of motivated individuals to control the process. Because if you're standing in a room with 40 other people or 400 other people and a bunch of them are yelling one way and a bunch of them are yelling the other way, right, the peer pressure on some will make them go one way or the other.
For the audience, describe what a caucus is like.
Yeah. Well, I've seen them in Iowa and I've seen them in Nevada. And they're it's a very social thing. I mean, in Iowa, a lot of them are done in people's homes. Some of them are done in people's homes. Some of them are done in schools. Some of them are done in like church basements. And you get a bunch of people in a room and you say, look, by that poll is for Edwards, by that poll is for Hillary, and by that poll is for Obama. Everybody go stand by the poll and we'll count. And then
the one that gets the majority gets that caucus. All of those.
Well, you have to get like a certain percentage. And if you don't get a certain certain percentage, and all the people who are over there, they now have to switch their vote and go into one of the other camps. And so that's where the peer pressure comes in, right? Because you walk in for your guy. And if your guy doesn't get the certain percentage, then you then have to switch to another camp, and that's where it becomes undemocratic.
Now, the Democratic Party has caucuses. Does the Republican Party have caucuses too?
I'm not sure, to be totally
I've never
honest with
really
you.
heard that, but
I'm not 100% sure if they do.
That's an interesting, and not every state has a caucus. Only a few states have caucuses.
It's only a few states that have caucuses. It's probably like 10 or 12 states that have caucuses. But Obama did a great job. As I talked about, him involving people in part of his process made them so much more motivated to go be a part of it. And so in some of the smaller caucus states, you know, a few hundred organized, motivated individuals can make a huge difference. And that was the delegate difference.
And every day I would get about 10 messages from the Obama campaign on my computer.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job of using technology in a way folks had never really seen before.
Well, let's talk about New York City. We have a mayoral election coming up.
That's
and
right.
We have a very wealthy mayor who's done a reasonably good job, and we have a challenger, an African-American challenger. We have a congressman who wants to challenge, and probably a Latino who wants to challenge. How do you see this working out? Not what the results are, but what is going to be the dynamics?
Well, this is going to be a difficult one. This is going to be a difficult one because this mayor is going to have to spend the next 7 or 9 months giving bad news to the city, right? There isn't going to be any more money there, even with the stimulus package, even with, you know, certain things will be diverted, but things are going to be bad for a while. And he's got to continue to give bad news. So that makes his reelection prospects a little bit different. Also, he's an independent. He's not a Republican, where he was both in 2001 and 2005. So he has to figure out what line of the ballot he's going to be on, besides just the independent line that he runs himself. But he, as an individual, has a lot of money to disperse to groups for their support at a time when they need money more than ever. So that's going to be a very tricky thing. And I would remind folks that when Mayor Bloomberg became mayor, his company was worth $5 billion. And now, 8 years later, his company's worth $15 billion. So although it's been bad for some of us, it's not been so bad for him.
Because he's involved in the financial industry.
Exactly. So it's going to be an interesting race in that context. I think Billy
Thompson and Weiner?
Well, I think they both have very different challenges. I mean, Billy Thompson is a unique person at this time, extremely well qualified, knows the issues backwards and forward, understands the finances of the city, and has a compelling story. Former president of the Board of Education, first African-American comptroller in the city of New York, running to be the second African-American mayor after the election of Barack Obama last year. He has to engage his voters. He's got to put together that coalition that we talked about.
Now, who would be the members of that coalition?
Well, it would be beginning with his base of African-Americans, adding to that Latinos, Asians, and what we call progressive whites as consultants, right? The folks who live on the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side of Manhattan, Cobble Hill in Brooklyn, Brownstone, Brooklyn, and different parts of the city. But Billy also has a great relationship with the Jewish community. You know, he's a native of Brooklyn. His father was a state senator and a judge from Brooklyn. He has deep roots throughout Brooklyn, and he's been elected citywide twice, won 2 hard elections. So he has the basis of the coalition. Just got to do some work and talk to some people and begin to tell his compelling story, which I think he did very well this weekend in Albany.
We'll talk about Weiner.
Weiner is a energetic, intelligent Congress member from Queens and Brooklyn, who comes from the Senator Schumer School of politicians.
Which is
Chuck has a whole school of politicians running out there who are very aggressive.
Never avoid a camera.
No,
head.
not at all. No, not at all. They understand the press and use the press to their advantage, rightfully so.
On good issues, too.
On good issues, too, yeah. And Anthony has been very good on issues and has been standing up for the middle class for a long time. And in 2005, he could have pushed for a runoff with Freddie Ferrer, but withdrew in name of the party. And folks won't forget that. I hope that one of them, I hope that someone decides not to run so that the person who is the nominee will have a clear shot at Bloomberg to make the Democratic case, because if not, it's going to be tough. It'll be tough to fight a primary battle and then turn around and fight a guy with $150 million or more that he could spend at a blink of an eye.
That's because the primary battle takes up so much energy and money.
It does. It takes up a lot of money, takes up a lot of energy, and then
you have losers. Some of the losers who want to drop out.
Exactly. And then you have the short period between the primary and the general election is only 6 or 7 weeks. So you don't have a lot of time to recover.
What issues are going to be key in that election?
Well, I think the economy is absolutely going to be key. It's going to be key in every issue. In every election in this city.
But the economy vis-a-vis the city.
Vis-a-vis the city, yes.
You mean
job creation, tax cuts, benefits to homeowners. There's a rental tax or a cut for basis for rental tax that's going to be a big issue. Healthcare is going to be a big issue as people lose their jobs. As people lose jobs every day, how are they going to take care of their families? I mean, there are going to be a lot of huge issues that face the city. And let's not forget, one of the most important issues, Mayor Bloomberg has rezoned over 65% of the city of New York since he became mayor. And what do those rezonings mean for the people who live in the city? All these big box stores, small box stores, condos, co-ops, now that they can't sell them, are they going to rent them? What's going to happen to the people who got pushed out?
One thing we can be sure is that folks like Kevin Wardally of Bill Lynch Associates and the other political consultants in this town will be very, very busy. Today on African American Legends, we've been talking with Kevin Wardally of Bill Lynch Associates. Thank you very much for a very enlightening discussion.
Thank you, sir.